Welcome to Inside the Skev, and I'm your host, Aaron Nasliansky. Today, I am delighted to have Patrick Keenan-Devlin, and he is from the Moran Center, which is in Evanston, and they do some great work to help with people, mainly teens, but we're going to talk about it and talk about restorative justice and what that means and why they started. So, Patrick, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Aaron. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Moran Center does?
Sure. So I always like to start when I talk about the Moran Center about its history.
Yeah.
So it started in 1976, but its founding story really goes back to the death of a young 19-year-old in our community. His name was John Cox. He had a 2-year-old son who was unresponsive one evening. He proceeded to give him CPR, chest compressions, without receiving a response from his child. Calls 911, 911 responds to the scene, and the child was pronounced dead at the scene. His father, John, is arrested for murder. He's held in custody for days without counsel, without contact with his family, and ultimately attempts suicide in an Evanston jail cell. He's then brought to Evanston Hospital in a coma. Evanston Hospital lies to his family and says, "You can't afford our medical bills." So then convinces the family to transfer him in a coma to the Cook County Hospital. Cook County Hospital welcomed him with open arms in having a gurney set up to take him right out the back door to the county jail hospital. So after his third transfer, he died. And at the time, Alderman Moran was on the city council and investigated with Northwestern University the police, the hospital, the county, the public defender's office, and ultimately found that there was a equity gap, a justice gap in our community, and that he found about $23,000 in the city budget to start a community-based defense organization. So that's the core of what we do. Is we represent children and young adults up to the age of 26 in criminal and juvenile delinquency proceedings, from jail side to litigation. But Alderman Moran, and then Jimmy Carter later appointed him to the bench, so Judge Moran, really believed that as lawyers, we needed to have a holistic approach to counseling. And so from the very founding of our organization, we always had social workers working right alongside us, because nobody who enters into the justice system enters in without trauma and without typically complex challenges that they're confronting. And so we've always partnered with social workers. That's the core of what we do. And then everything else that we do really is tied back to that. So we have, for example, an education advocacy program where we as lawyers advocate for kids in school discipline proceedings and in special education proceedings, because we feel that if kids can succeed in school, then we've broken down that school to prison pipeline. So a prevention tool. We then have a school-based civil legal clinic. And the thought there is, if we can help families stabilize by avoiding evictions, by securing public benefits, by appealing public benefit denials, if we can provide that type of stabilization, families will not be ostracized by our community. They will not be entered into broken institutions like our criminal justice system, and they can stay here where we want them to be. So everything kind of ties back to how can we break down pipelines, the school to prison pipeline, the poverty to prison pipeline, the poverty to institutionalization pipeline, to support families and children and young adults. So that's the core of what we do.
How many people do you typically work with every year?
So we typically work with about 1,400 kids and youth and families every year. That number keeps rising every year. One of our signature programs, which I failed to talk about, is our expungement and sealing help desk, which we operate every Tuesday and Thursday from 10 to noon at the Skokie Courthouse. And the core of that work is to help people who have criminal backgrounds remediate their criminal records. And right now, in this moment in our country and our world, that's going to be even more critical. We have the highest unemployment rates since the Great Depression. And that misdemeanor conviction that you received maybe 20 years ago didn't hold you back from securing employment when you got that last job 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But in today's market, where it will be probably the most competitive job market in the history of our country, that record will really mean the difference between you getting a job and you not getting a job. So at that help desk, we help about 850 people per year clear their criminal backgrounds. And it's adults that we help at that help desk, but almost every adult is connected to a child. And so it's still very mission focused that our work is about helping adults and families, because if we help adults and families, we're thereby helping children.
Right. Now, you said that the help desk is actually inside the Skokie Courthouse?
Inside the Skokie Courthouse, right outside the clerk's office.
So how are you operating now? And, do people have to communicate with you over Zoom or something like that?
It's a great question. So the courts are closed, and they've been closed since March 16th. And what we've done is we've built out our website to have more information about expungement and sealing. So it's moran-center.org/expungement. You can go on that webpage and learn more about the expungement and sealing process in Cook County and in the state of Illinois. But we've also partnered with...
I think I'll show you. I could share the screen, which is
Great.
So cool about Zoom. So why don't we show everybody that?
Great.
If you're listening on audio, watch the video. So we're on the website right here, and you said where can we go to find this?
So you can either just do /expungement, or if you go to how we can help, under that tab is Expungement and Sealing Help Desk. And right there are tons of brochures and information about the expungement and sealing process in Cook County and in Illinois. And we have all the information in Spanish as well.
That's great.
But what I was going to say is that we have also, like many industries, had to rethink how we serve people, given that we're not able to connect face-to-face. And that's a real challenge in the judicial system. We're about 20, 30 years behind most industries. I mean, prior to the pandemic, I was still filing carbon copy motions in the Circuit Court of Cook County. So we have a long way to go in terms of modernizing. But what we've done at the Moran Center, there's an amazing organization in Illinois called the Illinois Legal Aid Online. And it is a website that is really consumer focused to help consumers navigate complex legal issues. And as a partner with ILEA, we can answer people's questions through that platform. We can do online intakes through that platform. And then this crisis has prompted Clerk Dorothy Brown to open up her criminal and traffic database online. So as registered attorneys can now access people's records online. Whereas before the crisis, we actually had to physically be in the courthouse to look up a person's record. So now we can do an intake online, we can advise people online, and we can even look up people's record online and start the petitioning process. Now, the issue is, though, we have to wait for the courts to reopen to file the petition, but we can get a lot of work done in the meantime so as to grease the wheels from when the courts actually do, in fact, reopen.
Does it frustrate you at all that it took a pandemic to be able to modernize where people can at least, you can check this stuff online? I mean, I know in my industry, I'm in real estate, a lot of things that people wouldn't do before because for whatever reason, or even in mental health, you couldn't do telehealth because your insurance wouldn't cover it. But now all of a sudden, everything's okay. Right. I mean, what gives?
I do think in the judicial system, the leaders of our judicial system are overly cautious, and I think it's understandable as to why. For example, in the criminal courts, the courts have transitioned to Zoom hearings, and for efficiency purposes, I can appreciate that, particularly in a pandemic. But when a person's liberty is at stake, that is a person-to-person hearing, and I truly believe should always be a person-to-person hearing. I think you lose a lot when it is put online. I think, and I also think there are questions of confidentiality that are at play that are not as easily resolved on an online platform. But circling back to your point, I do think that there will be many silver linings to the pandemic, and one is that it has forced the hand of many leaders in our country, in our state, in our region to rethink how they do things. And one way is that lawyers now have access to the criminal and traffic database, which I expect will be ongoing access that we have after the pandemic recedes. But I mean, I have to throw myself into that bucket too. I mean, there are ways that we're delivering services that I never thought we would have been able to prior to the pandemic. But I'm very proud that the pandemic has compelled us to be creative, be innovative.
Yeah, that's what it's done. It's made people be very creative to be able to accomplish what they need to. One of the things, though, that there is, especially in your line of work, there can be a digital divide, and people may not have access to the technology that's needed in order to be able to communicate with you. So have you been working with any organizations to try to get, Chromebooks or anything like that? I know, like in the district, for the school district, they're working to get people technology.
Right. So we are incredibly grateful to both District 202 and District 65 that they have unbelievably quickly dispersed technology, Wi-Fi hotspots, Chromebooks to their students and to their families. And that's actually allowed us to keep in contact with our clients. It's allowed the school districts to implement e-learning fairly quickly. It has also allowed the district to comply with federal law. So the U.S. Department of Education and the Illinois State Board of Education have been very clear to school districts locally and nationally that they are to comply with IDEA requirements, so the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So if you have a child with a disability, there are strict timelines for when meetings need to be held, evaluations need to be conducted, annual reviews need to be done, and the schools are still bound by those timelines. And most of those things require meetings with parents. And we've had to walk our parents through, our families through, how to access online platforms to participate in those meetings, how to participate in those meetings. But both the districts have really been incredible at thinking through how to provide access to families in our community. I mean, the challenge, though, is access is one thing. But right before this conference call, Aaron, I was doing kindergarten lessons with my 5-year-old. And that's because I have the unbelievable privilege of, one, being my own boss, but two, having the flexibility provided by my organization to do that. I am an extremely privileged individual. There are so many families in our community that don't have that luxury. Or if you're an essential worker, you certainly don't have that luxury. Right. And so I think one concern that the Moran Center has is not only the digital divide, but the privilege divide, and that the achievement gap that we've experienced in this country and certainly in our community for decades, if not centuries, I think will really be exacerbated by this crisis. And it's going to be a COVID-19 learning loss, but it's going to be felt much more within communities that have already been disinvested by this country.
Well, absolutely. And I think that the people that are working at grocery stores, meatpacking plants, whatever it may be, are predominantly people who have been disadvantaged. And, if people get sick, their whole families get sick, or people don't want to hire people coming into their homes, let's say cleaning services or whatnot. And all different types of service workers. I think that could potentially exacerbate issues and create the propensity for more crime. So it's incredibly important to try to figure out how to bridge this. It's a huge task that you have on your hands, and it's almost like your organization has become so much more important within the past month and a half.
I think that's right. For some reason, I was a history major. Yeah. And so for some reason, I'm constantly thinking back to President Johnson's war on poverty. And when the president rolled out the war on poverty, he ensured that on the front lines of that war were lawyers. And it was fairly innovative at the time, led by Sergeant Shriver, that lawyers were an integral part to fighting poverty. And this nation will recede into a Great Depression, as predicted by economists across this country. And it will be lawyers on the front lines alongside healthcare workers and homeless prevention stabilization organizations that lead the effort to rebuilding this country to ensure that disinvested families and children gain access to the public benefits that they're due under the law, that if they are denied, they have the access to appeal, that their rights within our educational system are preserved, that liberties within our judicial system are protected. It really will be lawyers that will be fighting on behalf of families that have been just unbelievably broken by this pandemic.
Yeah, it's heavy. Yeah. What led you, though, to get into this line of work? Were you always an attorney fighting for people who you help now, or did you start somewhere else?
When I graduated from law school, when I graduated from undergrad, I had an unbelievable opportunity. I was an AmeriCorps Vista, which is part of the AmeriCorps program, Volunteers in Service to America. And I served for 1 year at the Sargent Shriver National Center on Poverty Law. Maybe that's why I feel so rooted in the war on poverty, because the roots of that organization are in the war on poverty. And I did policy work at the Shriver Center, particularly in Medicaid policy. My next job was in Springfield. I was an advocate on behalf of consumers working on predatory lending reforms, campaign finance reforms, et cetera. And then that work in Springfield compelled me to go to law school because in Springfield, the people who were really leading the policy discussions were lawyers. So I always intended to go back into consumer rights. And then I stumbled on the Moran Center during law school. And the executive director at the time recruited me to come work for the Moran Center one summer as a law clerk, because she said, I think you'll really enjoy working for children and young people. And she was right. I loved it. And thankfully, when I graduated, there was a job opening. And so I took the job, and that was about 8 years ago. And then about 4 years ago, I became the executive director of the Moran Center. So I've always been in the anti-poverty movement in our country. And I do see the work of the Moran Center as part of that larger movement. Yeah. But particularly our job is to dismantle these pipelines of injustice that are just so entrenched within our country and our community.
Do you think it's possible to fully accomplish that?
Yes, I do. It is incredible that Congress in the past month and a half has invested $2.1 trillion back into the economy. They can no longer say that they cannot find the money to end homelessness. They can no longer say that they can't find the money to provide universal health care. They have lost the ability to say that, because in a few days, they somehow found $2.1 trillion, and they keep on finding trillions of dollars to pump back into the economy. So yeah, I do think it is possible. I know last week or maybe a week before you interviewed Nia Tevralars from
Yes.
Connections for the Homeless. What that organization has done with smart investments and investments from state, federal, and local levels and individual donors, they've ended homelessness in our community. And it's incredible. I mean, it really is. It's incredible. Yes. But what we have to do, and what in supporting organizations like Connections for the Homeless, is making sure that it's not just short term. How horrible would it be that we ended homelessness in Evanston for a month and then we let it go back to where it was before?
That's what I
wonder. That would be a shame, and I think a moral wrong. And so I'm really excited.
Yeah,
but look, we found $2.1 trillion in the federal budget. I think it is possible. I really do.
What do you think about being a history buff, and especially in this line? Why didn't the war on poverty end poverty? I mean, Johnson spent a lot of money at that time too to try to reinvest and to try to fix these problems.
There's a lot of political reasons why the war on poverty did not accomplish its intended goal. But look, it accomplished a lot of its goals. I mean,
Yeah.
Strengthened Social Security. We got Medicaid and Medicare. We got the Legal Services Corporation, the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps. I mean, so much of our social safety net is owed to that war on poverty. But we can't stop there. And Johnson, when he rolled out the war on poverty, had a vision for universal health care. And he couldn't achieve it. And so we got Medicare. I mean, do not, to quote Senator Kennedy, do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We can keep making progress. I think the Affordable Care Act is an example of progress that we've made in this country, but we can still go further.
Do you think you also talk about, you're saying how we were able to spend $2.1 trillion in the blink of an eye, really. And Andrew Yang was talking a lot about when he was campaigning about universal basic income. And, now, okay, so every family's gotten money from the government. We're talking about potentially it being on a monthly basis. Jan Schakowsky was talking about. I mean, it's incredible how things can change, how change is so fast nowadays, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, will that help people?
Well, to quote Rahm Emanuel, who I rarely quote, never let a crisis go to waste. I mean, I think that this is an opportunity for those of us who have been on the front lines of ending poverty and fighting poverty and creating innovative, inventive solutions, policy solutions to the table, like our Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. This is a time to act. This is a time to be bold. Again, our Congress, in a blink of an eye, invested $2.1 trillion in our country. So this is a time to say, look, you can find $2.1 trillion. You can fund universal health care. You can fund food security for this country. You can then require and set basic standards for industry as to what a living wage is. We can do this as a country.
Yeah. And yeah, we can. And then, you talk about restorative justice. What does that mean, restorative justice? Is that everything that you're doing with social workers and, everything together?
It's a great question. So restorative justice is a new pillar of the Moran Center's services. And we started the Roger Pascal Restorative Justice Initiative, named after one of our founding board members, about 2 years ago. And I came to restorative justice through an organization in Back of the Yards called Precious Blood Ministries. And I was really taken by the concept and the principles, which are fairly basic. It's that you are, if you are a person who believes in restorative practices and principles and values, you are a radically welcoming individual. You are radically hospitable, that you are willing to listen and potentially radically forgive. And in learning about the practices and principles, I realized this is what's missing within the Moran Center's scope of programming. We are constantly in crisis mode, right? Ensuring that kids are getting what they need in school, ensuring that children are not locked up, making sure that families aren't denied food stamps. Making sure businesses are hiring people with criminal records. We're constantly plugging holes in the dam. And what restorative justice does and forces you to do is look at systems and say, how can we as a society, as a community, address problems more holistically, more radically, and really focus on what harm is being caused and how can we repair the harm. And its roots are in victim-offender mediation, right? You punched me, we sit down in a circle, and we mediate that harm that you caused. And I, as the victim, get to say to you, Aaron, this is what I need to be made whole. But you can quickly see that type of conversation can be held at a systems level. And so the thought is, if we can build not only personal one-to-one relationships in our community, like with you and me, Aaron, that is restorative and that's just rooted in these principles, that we can do the same in our schools, in our hospitals, in our government. So I'll give you a quick example. We worked with the city over the past 2 years to codify into city code a whole bunch of misdemeanors. And you might go, why would an organization that is justice oriented want to codify, crimes in the city code? Well, this was the idea, that we wanted to give officers another tool in their toolbox to, instead of arresting people, to be able to cite them. Mm-hmm. So as to pull them out of the Circuit Court of Cook County and keep them here at home, and hopefully address the harm in a less punitive way. So for adults, let's say you committed retail theft in downtown Evanston. A police officer could cite you for that offense, and you as an adult would go to the Civic Center, the Lorraine Morton Civic Center, and your case would be adjudicated there. So you wouldn't have an arrest, you wouldn't have a criminal conviction, you wouldn't have anything that you would need to expunge. It wouldn't appear on your permanent background. Now let's say, Aaron, you were 16 years old and you were arrested for the same crime. You also go to the Civic Center, but instead of being adjudicated, you actually enter into a restorative process where social workers from the city meet with you as a kid and your family and attempt to figure out what it is you need. Why did you do that? And what can you do to make up for it, to repair that harm? And what can we do as a community? Because we've obviously failed you in some way, shape, or form. So what can we do to help you? And if you meet all of the terms of that repair of harm agreement, is what it's called, nothing happens. There's no fine, there's no fee, there's no ridiculous, usually ancillary community service hours. It's really about meaningful repair. So that's just one way the Moran Center has worked to build restorative justice within government and the police department.
I have two questions to follow up with you on that. One is, why aren't we doing that for adults as well? And the second is, what if it's a violent crime?
Yes. So violent crimes we were successful in codifying two violent crimes. One is a battery and one is an assault. They are misdemeanor offenses. We have not removed discretion from police officers, though. So it's really still on police officers to make the determination whether this is an offense that is meriting a second chance and having that off-ramp to the Civic Center as opposed to, again, the Circuit Court of Cook County. So discretion is still within the hands of the officer that responds to the incident. In terms of why can't we do this for adults, I really hope we can. But I think that it was an easier sell to say, let's start with kids. Let's show that it works first and foremost. And then my goal, and everybody in the city knows that this is my goal, so I'm not sharing any secret, is to then raise the age from 18 to 26, which has been proven to be actually the point of maturation. Let's do that, and then if that's successful, my hope is to raise it to 96. So that's the ultimate.
If you're
goal.
97, you're screwed.
Yes. Sorry, you shouldn't be committing retail theft at 97.
Give them a pass at that point.
I hope we would, to be honest.
I really do. You've done your part in life. So you've got a lot going on here. How many people do you have working for you? Because it sounds like you have 1,400 people that you have through your doors every year. So that's a lot of work.
We have 16 staff. I know this off the top of my head because I submitted a grant yesterday. It comes to 13.225 full-time equivalent employees.
Okay.
That work tirelessly. We have 6 attorneys, including myself, and then the rest include 3 social workers, administrative staff, and development professionals that really are critical of keeping the lights on. Yeah. So that's the full makeup of the Moran Center.
Are you guys hiring right now? I mean, or
no?
I'm very tight. Yeah.
It will be an extremely tight budget next year. And what I have said to our philanthropic partners and our donors is my hope is to really toe the line and toe our expenses and keep them in line and in check so as we can keep everybody on staff. I don't expect us to be able to grow next year, potentially even in the coming years, but I think it is critical that we maintain the staff that we have now, because inevitably when the courts reopen, we will be inundated by demand. I mean, the governor's eviction order will be lifted.
Oh yeah,
at the end of this month. So landlords who have been itching to file eviction petitions will be allowed to do so. So there will be a deluge of eviction complaints that will be entering into the circuit court.
Scary.
People who have applied for unemployment benefits right about now are probably receiving either their acceptance or denial. So those denied applicants will need representation in the administrative and potentially at the court level. So I'm just expecting all of the challenges, the legal challenges that we have heard about in the news, and that we can just infer from walking on the streets of our community and in our country, that these will be the issues that people will be facing, and they'll need lawyers.
Oh, they will. It's scary to think about all the evictions and then, possible foreclosures and things like that.
Right.
I hope people can get back to work. I really do, but it's scary because we don't have a vaccine yet.
That's right. That's right. And I'll just plug, I love Connections for the Homeless. They've done such an unbelievable job in caring for our community and housing those who are really, really vulnerable right now, including many of my clients and many of my families. And one of the advocacy points that Connections is focusing on is there's a bill in Springfield that gives consumers some level of forgiveness as to rent and mortgage payments. I know that negotiations are ongoing as to what will make it into the final bill, so it's unclear as to what will make it in the final bill. But I would keep your eye on Connections for the Homeless's advocacy page for what consumers can do to advocate in Springfield.
Yeah, they are doing amazing work. When I saw that they got everybody off the streets in Evanston, I said, I've got to get a hold of them. And I saw Nia was quoted in an article. I immediately reached out to her. And it's amazing what you can do when you have to. And I think that donors who support these organizations, your organization relies on donors. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So how can people support you guys? I mean, is it on the website where they can donate?
Yes. So we have a donate link in the top right-hand corner.
I'll show everybody again.
And also, when you're showing everybody our website, you'll actually see a teal banner there it is. Mm-hmm. We actually have a virtual event coming up on May 21st. It's a Thursday evening at 7:30. We had, like everybody, planned for an in-person event, but we are going virtual. I also feel incredibly, incredibly fortunate, Aaron, about our honorees for this year, because they are very used to operating in a virtual world. So Ear Hustle, which is a podcast that is produced from San Quentin prison that really talks about and gives voice to men who are incarcerated in San Quentin, will be our honorees this year. And then Jen White of WBEZ will be interviewing Nigel Poor and Earlonne Woods from Ear Hustle. This is actually a big week also for both Ear Hustle and Jen White. Ear Hustle was named as a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. And then Jen White was just named as the nationally syndicated host of 1A in Washington, D.C. So they both had huge weeks. So I think it makes this event even more exciting for people to participate in.
You guys got incredible people to have as part of this. That's amazing. I got to sign up.
Yes, we had a lot of dumb luck this year. So
no kidding.
Very, very, very grateful. Very grateful.
Well, at least we had some good things happen.
Yes.
And then the donate button is right up here.
Yes, sir.
So easy to get to. And, you have, matching gifts right now. So if you can, please help Moran Center to continue to support the work that you're doing. I mean, it's incredible. You're welcome. You've got such a background and you're doing such great work. Do you think that you're doing is like affecting the world in such an incredible way? Or do you have other aspirations for, you have a great background for politics?
No, this is not, this is not about me, but I will say that, the Moran Center, so our restorative justice coordinator, Pam Citronbaum, every week does circles at Connections for the Homeless. because that staff really needs to be made whole. Probably more so than anybody, right? What trauma they're experiencing, witnessing. And what Pam has walked away after, what she's walked away from, the main takeaway she's walked away from those circles is that every frontline provider, every social service provider that she comes in contact with at Connections says, I'm not doing enough. I want to do more. I need to be doing more. And I think that's a universal truth. I think it's certainly a universal truth for me. It's a universal truth for my staff. When I sit in circle with my staff, everybody always complains about themselves and how they're not doing enough. And I think that is a sign of a helper, is that helpers feel that they are never doing enough. So, but I actually think that is somewhat true, that, the Moran Center can always be doing more. All of us can always be doing more because there's always more to do.
There is always more to do. The work never
goes away. It never goes away.
Never goes away. But I think that you guys are doing incredible things, and I wish that we didn't need you.
I wish we didn't either.
Not you.
I wish we didn't either. I wish we didn't. And I say that all the time. If an organization a nonprofit organization is in this work simply to keep itself afloat, then it's really missing the mark. I mean, every nonprofit should have a goal of getting out of business. Mm-hmm. And the prevention work that we do, our school-based civil legal clinic, our education advocacy program, and even the reentry work that we focus on with our expungement and sealing help desk, that is all there so as we can get out of business. And tied to that, my hope is that Moran Center can be more engaged in policy work too in the coming years, because often policymakers and policy advocates are removed from frontline service. And I think we have the advantage of being able to say, well, I saw this up close. I saw this injustice up close, and it can be fixed by just changing that semicolon, right? I mean, sometimes policy can be that easy. Now, the lift is always hard. But I really do think that the Moran Center has its focus in the right place, that it is about getting out of business altogether.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And the work that you could do with the schools and, changing how discipline works even there. I know that is a key to getting everybody to change how they feel and how they self-evaluate themselves. And when people constantly think that they're the bad kid, the prophecy becomes reality. So I think that it's so helpful to do this work and to continue to change the way we think.
Yeah. Well, I'll just end by saying, it sounds like we're landing that plane. I'll just say that a core principle at the Moran Center is no child is bad. All children want to do well. All children want to please. And if a child does fail, it's our fault. It's the adult's fault. It's the system's fault. It's society's fault. And as lawyers, social workers, and believers in restorative justice, I really do hope we get to change the narrative in our country about children and families.
That is a great message. So let's hope that we can do that. And everyone, just to learn more, go to moran-center.org. And Patrick, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it, and continue doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Aaron.
You're welcome.